Wide-scale adoption of cloud applications, an increase in remote workers, and expansion of branch offices has rendered the centralized, on-premises security model impractical. Enter Cisco Umbrella. Umbrella now includes secure web gateway, firewall, and cloud access security broker functionality, plus integration with Cisco SD-WAN, all delivered from a single cloud security service. It helps businesses of all sizes secure their network and extend protection to roaming users and branch offices. Security doesn't have to be complicated. Get simple, smart, and powerful security with Cisco Umbrella. Visit securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella to learn more. Today's networks are changing fast, and employees, devices, and infrastructures are more distributed than ever. Gigamon Threat Insight is a cloud-native, high-velocity network detection and response solution that's purpose-built to enable you to get in front of this transformation. Discover hidden network threats, automate security investigations, and optimize security workflows to stay a step ahead of attackers with Gigamon Threat Insight. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gigamon. Do you worry about ransomware, data breaches, reputation damage, especially from phishing attacks, on employees working from home? The facts are, top cloud security tools have a 15% failure rate. 51% of phishing is social media based. Pixum knows because Pixum detects and stops breaches at point of click. Pixum's AI real-time solution detects actual fraud happening in a browser and stops it. Know your real security gaps. Get a phishing actualization test free at securityweekly.com/Pixum. That's PIXM. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, you can visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe to all of our podcasts on the Security Weekly network via your favorite podcast catcher. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, and follow us on Twitch. On July 14th, a demo cast will be held at 11 a.m. Eastern. You'll learn how to reveal and protect your entire attack surface. You'll also learn how to rattle pots and pans in the background while we're having a show. It's totally fine. It's okay. On July 15th, at, of course, 11 a.m. Eastern, learn how a thoughtful approach to SASE can improve security and enable scalability. Then on July 22nd at, guess what time? That's right, 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you guessed that, you are correct. You'll learn how guided SaaS NDR enables rapid response. Learn more and register at securityweekly.com/webcasts. Of course, if you missed any of our previous webcasts, you can find them on demand at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Now, on to the enterprise security news. Where do we want to start?
Sorry about the pots and pans. I can't complain too much, when your kids are washing the dishes. Like,
this
you're
is
just
true.
happy that they're washing the dishes.
Right. Never mind, Dad's doing a podcast.
Yeah. Hey, working from home.
That's it.
So I got some in here. I don't know if you've refreshed, but I did get mine in here.
Illumio raises $225 million in a Series F led by Thoma Bravo. But this is the best description of a company, I think, ever. Illumio is described as a self-styled zero-trust unicorn. Like, where do I buy my self-styled zero-trust unicorn? Because I must have a self-styled zero-trust unicorn. I want one on my desk.
I mean, at $225 million, they have to be a unicorn, right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, their valuation is $2.75 billion. So they're like...
Yeah,
that's crazy.
But, I think there's a big but here, And
so your self-styled zero-trust unicorn has a big butt? Is that what you're saying?
I try not to judge, but I can't help it. I think, they were one of the first to try and make microsegmentation into a market segment. And I think if it worked, and it's interesting that they're using zero trust, because it's not really microsegmentation isn't really a necessary component of zero trust. I mean, sure, it can help, but it's not really one of the key pieces. And I think that's kind of an attempt at a pivot, because we've never really seen microsegmentation catch on a lot. I've heard rumors of how few customers they have. Certainly for a company with a $2.75 billion valuation, I'm sure some of those customers are big, like big deal value, big, huge customers with millions of endpoints and stuff like that.
The first to market becomes very big at that point, right? If you get first to market, you kind of have a unique micro-segmentation is kind of where they started at, but like you said, they had to make that pivot and become part of the zero trust conversation, which helps their valuation, helps, the product itself from a sales and marketing standpoint. But that doesn't necessarily mean the product's changed.
Right. And I think if this were really going well, it would be, they'd be alongside SentinelOne announcing an IPO,
Agreed.
Not a Series F from a private equity firm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because now they have to start churning out profit.
Yeah, and typically, when the PE shops get involved, they tend to buy cheap, and they're hoping to combine stuff together, So I would look in the future for Illumio to be acquired by someone, or maybe, Thoma Bravo takes some of its existing investments or grabs a few new ones and crushes it together and spins it out as, maybe something that can IPO, or maybe something that gets acquired, for 3 or 4 billion, 5 billion by some larger company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Thoma Bravo looks like they're diversifying. Obviously, like the Proofpoint acquisition was kind of interesting. This seems like another interesting piece where they're trying to get a foot in that door, and then, like you said, do a combination of interesting products that maybe haven't been used together. If they can pull some of that off, then I could see a viable product coming out of this. But you start to talk about Series F and Series F at 225 million. We're starting to get into the place where someone's going to they got to recoup some of that money. And so they're going to do something, and they're going to do something drastic, which may be a full pivot with another company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, my first question for Illumio when I first briefed with them, I think in 2013, maybe 2014, was, it's a fantastic idea. It's one of these ideas that sounds great, but when you think about managing it, how is this not like me going from 8 firewall policies to 8,000 all of a sudden, like overnight? And that's the piece that I remember saying back then, like you're going to have to figure out that piece. And I've never seen it solved.
There's a couple places that have done it better, where they've kind of like combined a lot of rules, and they've combined a lot of heuristics and built in interesting like AI values and things that kind of do some of that work for you. But you're right, you're going from very small set of rules to very large set. Things like Guardicore or even the Zscaler stuff. Like, those work really well. They're very effective.
Yeah. Yes.
But you do have to configure them, and the management and configuration of those, like having done that in a small deployment, man, I don't wish that upon anybody, honestly.
Yeah, like if this really worked, SolarWinds, absolutely, this approach could have prevented SolarWinds, but did it? No.
Yeah, because the configuration's tedious. I mean, and Zscaler especially has got some pretty neat AI and ML models to assist with that configuration. And that gets you a lot of the way there. But for certain applications, your mileage is going to vary, right? And they have to train their models too on different use cases.
Yeah, and we don't know what we don't know. Maybe it did stop SolarWinds at some companies that otherwise would have been in the news. But yeah, it still stands that ideally, if they manage to make this easier to configure, you'd see it everywhere. Everybody be using it.
I like BitDiscovery's raise, kind of in the opposite vein from
Me too.
companies that take a lot of money. We had some great chats with Jeremiah not that long ago, and you really come to respect the approaches of certain folks in our industry that are like, I don't want to take on huge amounts of money, right? I don't want, some of us have done that, and they want to grow at a reasonable rate, take reasonable funding rounds, and gain customers, and do that, I think, in a more paced environment rather than a super high growth, high stress, over kind of compensating, which is what I think some of the security companies do in the industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's been in the industry for a long time, Jeremiah, and all the other folks there are pretty experienced, so it's kind of nice to see a raise that's more slow and controlled and not obsessed with crazy growth at any any cost.
Yeah, I mean, congrats to the team, right? They took a Series B at $4 million. It's good stuff. I also Noname Security is one of my favorite names of a security company.
Is it? It's I don't know.
For the humorous aspect of it.
Yeah, I get kind of annoyed at the more clever stuff because I've worked with a lot of these companies on the marketing side, and I've worked with a few vendors that had clever names, and it does become more of a pain than a help, because people end up, like if there's a funny version of it, you'll hear that more than the real name, or you'll just get a lot of confusion. Like personally, I spent like 10 minutes trying to find out what the actual name of the company Redacted was,
right?
Because the press release said Redacted all over it, and maybe I hadn't had enough coffee, but it eventually occurred to me that they're being clever and the name was Redacted.
Right, but now you remember that name, so sometimes that can work to your advantage in marketing. But the trick as you grow is allowing people to come to that conclusion, which could take time.
Yeah,
right.
But so how many people see that and say, "Oh, it might be interesting to check out once they come out of stealth," and they like move on.
Yep, double-edged sword. They took so Noname Security took $60 million in a Series B to eliminate API flaws.
Pretty good for a company without a name.
In other API news, 42 Crunch integrates with Postman to provide enterprise with continuous API protection. And that's like all they said about the integration. If you go on to read the rest of the press release, it says all these wonderful flowery things about APIs and security, but says nothing about what does this integration actually do for your customers and how does it help improve security? I get what 42 Crunch does. Postman's a great tool, certainly, but if there must be some. Postman has some commercial like I've only ever used Postman the application, and what I love is when you craft a post request, it gives you like the Python code on how to like create that. It's the world's greatest shortcut, right? It gives you into like a bunch of different languages. That's why I love Postman. But obviously they've got other things in their port. I've only used the tool. I haven't kind of dug into what Postman does beyond the free tool they make available.
Yeah, I mean it's fantastic. I've used it for prototyping and for testing, and it's my go-to for doing anything with an API. And I can totally see how it's already designed to where it'd be pretty easy to plug in modules and click a button and go to do some kind of security audit on the API. But yeah, it'd be nice to have some more details on it. We're seeing a whole lot of API security stuff, and I think at some point we're going to have to dive deeper into that to learn more about what they're doing, because some of them are gateways, like proxy type stuff, looking for malicious calls, and others are looking for issues, within the API endpoints themselves. Which
you end up with a lot better web apps, right? Like the web apps are more secure, and now that's led attackers to start to have to hammer on the APIs more. There's a lot more exposed to APIs. Look at, LinkedIn just this week, the full LinkedIn database was scraped via an API flaw. Like all of these APIs are eventually going to catch up with just about everybody that's exposed to an API. So there's going to be security products that start to come out.
That's not a vulnerability. That's a feature,
use.
Tyler.
Right.
That's a feature.
It's a feature for me. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, isn't that what what is that? Completely blanking on the name of that new social network. That's kind of like radio stations.
Oh,
Clubhouse.
Yeah, Clubhouse.
Clubhouse. Yeah, so that was Clubhouse's response, right, to when somebody scraped the entire API and pulled all the user data. Yeah, it's a
feature.
That's how we intended it to be used.
It's like Venmo. Yep, it's a feature.
Yeah. Which is kind of scary, right? Like the API, like if you just know what you're doing, which most general public is not going to be hitting that. So the people that are hitting it are going to be people of technical prowess. And if they have malicious intent, then obviously APIs are going to lend themselves to be very dangerous long term. And they're not honestly, easy to secure.
I think the risk is bigger. Like, I'm not so worried about attackers using it as I'm worried about marketing and advertising firms abusing that data. Like that's where I'm seeing the threat from.
Yeah, I mean, in both cases, the payoff is pretty high, right? And a lot of these large companies use bot detection and rate limiting and even session authentication to control the API. But as we know as hackers, there's always ways around those. That could be to potentially uncover something and gain unauthorized access to data, or that could be just a use case for the API that plays into a larger scheme, or like you said, Adrian, it can be used by marketers for data collection.
Yeah.
EclecticIQ is delivering threat intelligence, hunting, and response capabilities. I wasn't quite sure what this announcement was about. It kind of said everything that you would kind of, want to uncover in your platform, and I didn't see any real differentiators on this one. I've not done like a briefing, or I haven't really seen EclecticIQ, so they, quite possibly could have a really great platform. But they say they focus on attacker tools, techniques, procedures, not just indicators of compromise. It seemed kind of like a spin on threat intelligence coupled with some threat hunting, and providing that to cross-functional kind of security teams.
Yeah, so I actually just listened to an interview on another podcast with the, I guess it was the founder.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the CEO and founder here. And I'm not sure I quite got there with the interview and understanding exactly what they're doing, but certainly there was a lot of talk about moving away from IOCs as the value in just individual IOCs goes down. And it's still very much complementary to a SIEM. It's not going to replace, it might replace some threat hunting tools, but it's not going to replace the SIEM or anything like that. But it does sound like they're, focusing a lot on pulling more EDR data, using that to understand attack behaviors. They're very focused on integrating the MITRE ATT&CK matrix with it, and pairing up with Devo, which is kind of like a sumo logic competitor, Splunk competitor. So that's going to be more the disk side of things here, and they'll do more the threat intel, correlation and analysis piece of it. But Patrick Gray over at Risky Business has an interesting interview with him that's worth checking out. Very
cool. A lot of ways to skin that cat. All in one platform, multiple platforms, and combination of platforms to get down to, how you integrate threat intelligence with log data, with network traffic, with endpoint. Some are calling that XDR, right? And that's really confusing based on the terminology. But, I've always had the opinion anyhow that you need some way to collect and make sense of all that data and operationalize it. And there's just so many ways to do that today.
Yeah, and after talking about microsegmentation, again, another very labor-intensive process here.
Yeah.
So some organizations won't have the resources to do it, and others have to decide, how to best spend that time. If they've got some dedicated folks doing threat hunting and threat analysis.
Mm-hmm. DoD approves ISC squared certifications as a requirement for staff. So adding to the list of CISSP, which is already a requirement, they've added the Healthcare Information Security and Privacy Practitioner, as well as the Certified Cloud Security Professional certifications. Which, good news for ISC
squared. The cloud one
squared.
doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
The healthcare one's interesting.
The healthcare one is interesting. I've been kind of curious why that one out of the list of 100 others, but
right, and specifically for like DoD, like is that because the healthcare is a component of it, right? Because you're veterans hospitals and other such.
It's a small niche of DoD.
So
it is a small
finance.
Niche. Yeah,
they're like. DoD, are like small cities, there's a bit of everything in there.
It's true.
So why, I'm with you. Why throw healthcare of all things in there?
I think it's good that they continue the expansion of more cert opportunities as long as they're good certs.
Yeah.
I see some of the certs that end up in there and they're kind of, whatever.
I mean,
it's good to see good certs get in.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate and be the go after the flip side of that, which is already government struggles to acquire talent, and this is going to make it harder for them.
Now, I don't disagree with you there. That's a problem, right? Like when you start requiring certificates to have a certain GS level or a certain job, especially if you have experience that backs. A lot of us stopped taking certificates. We started teaching certificates, so we don't have valid certs anymore. If that precludes us from certain employment or, serving in certain branches of the government, that's a problem. That's the GS scale is already messed up from a competitive standpoint and keeping up. You start adding in certificates to augment some of that, that's going to be even worse.
I mean, and maybe they're already doing this. I don't know a ton about how they bring in, acquire, and train talent, but certainly at a certain level, you might expect somebody to already have these certs. But at a certain level, if they have them take an aptitude test, that's specific to cybersecurity, and then train them up yourself, and let them get the certs as they're working for you.
There's a lot of opportunity. The government has been doing a really good job about offering certs once you get in, which is great. You look at some of the, DoD, NSA, a lot of the bigger agencies provide that training. It's when they require certain certificates for requirements to get the job. That's when it starts to suck.
And SANS has a good program with the Army for acquiring those
Army and
skills.
Air Force both.
Yeah, for acquiring those certifications, and I think that's a positive thing. You've seen many in our community kind of come out of that program and be very skilled, highly skilled practitioners. So I think it's a good thing, but also, careful with the requirement, I think is what I'm hearing from the panel, right? Is we don't want to raise the bar, set the bar that's not achievable, let someone in that has the aptitude and then pay for their certs, right? Put them on a certificate program. When we were interviewing Jim from Offensive Security, that's kind of where I was guiding him is, I'd like to see, there was a lot of parallels between like Cisco networking certifications, right? And I think there's very few that like just go off on their own and achieve a CCIE that aren't working in the field, right? And so there has to be this apprenticeship, there has to be this working aspect to it, and I think that applies to cybersecurity as well.
Actually, believe it or not, that's fairly common. I've been mentoring folks, and I often see somebody who's gone off and gotten like a CISSP or a CCIE with zero experience in the industry, which is bizarre to me. Know, because that's those aren't entry level certs, and like how are they learning this stuff in any kind of way that makes practical sense to them? Yeah, it's got to be just a lot of memorization and stuff like that. Like I think certifications,
taking tests.
Yeah, I mean they make a lot more sense when you're learning something practical in the process. Like I think
you can get so far with memorization, but when you get to OSCP, CCIE level, you've got to show that you can apply it. You've got to build. You've got to build a network. I don't know if CCIE still works this way, but
I think it does. You got to
build a network, and then they change things and break the network. And when you come back, like you have to fix that stuff.
You got to troubleshoot it.
Yeah. OSCP is the same way. Jim's, hey, you got 20 processors. You got 24 hours to take the OSCP. Like, that's it.
Crazy.
JFrog acquired Vdoo. Is that how you say that? I want to say Vdoo when I look at it, because you know how your brain inserts characters and words and things like that. Like your brain is basically an autocomplete engine is part of it. I think it's Vdoo. I'll go with that for now. So Vdoo does, what do they do? Is it SCA, software composition analysis? It kind of sounded like.
Don't know. They're new to me. Platform for connected devices, IoT security.
Yeah, so Vdoo's security experts and vulnerability researchers will join the JFrog team. Sounds like JFrog is kind of further pivoting into security, would you say?
No, I think they're, this is like a module for them, so it's again, kind of like, trying to think of a good example here. There have been a few companies acquiring up, who acquired Black Duck? That's a good example here, where it's more of a
Synopsys.
Yeah, Synopsys.
Mm-hmm.
Where like their core focus isn't anywhere near security, but it's a really nice, kind of side business. Same thing with the company that acquired Tripwire. Like they're focused on OT stuff. And security just really makes sense to have, in your product portfolio for that kind of company.
What else you got?
There's definitely a lot. Man, there's two big stories that are just like popping out. I don't know if we're waiting until the end, but
no, go for it.
Let's do it.
Sonic Wall is obviously a big one because they've kind of played in the SMB market for a very long time. They've got some very niche use cases. For some reason, they seem to be deployed in OT environments that I run into a lot. I don't know if there's a big push for sales when Dell acquired them or how they got into OT so heavily, but Sonic Wall launching enterprise-grade firewalls is kind of interesting. We'll see if they can actually kind of catch up. There's a pretty big, some big players there between Palo and Cisco. Like, you're really having to contend and offer something very unique. Maybe the price will fit, but enterprise firewalls will be an interesting launch for them.
It's a very commoditized market, so why not?
Yeah, I guess if you can make the price work and there's plenty of room to sell, that seems like, I guess, a play that they should have made a while ago. But
I think the market...
AWS and Wickr, though, we got to talk about that one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, the message on that one was... people are working from home because of the pandemic. And if there's one storyline that I'm really tired of, it's that, right? And that seemed to be where some of the focus was in this announcement, people need secure communications because I'm we've always needed secure communications. It doesn't matter. We always work from home in a certain capacity.
What were you doing before?
Right? People did work
Security
from home.
Security didn't matter.
And especially if you're in IT and operations, you always had to work from home. You were on call, right? And a lot of people still are. And if that's a great use case for secure communications, doing incident response, and just all the operations that happen with a company. And not to mention, you can apply that to all facets of your organization. You want to have secure communications with your HR department, with your finance department. Independent of where we're working or how we're working, we need secure communications. And I feel like that should have been the focus, of that.
Yeah, I think that's just they had to figure out a good headline for why we bought this that fits into the marketing strategy. Wickr's a great acquisition. Their new stuff with the government and kind of how they have managed platforms and a central, enterprise level signal, more or less, right? You have end-to-end communications that's manageable, that has policies applied to it, that can have very granular rule sets. We don't have anything to control that for communications now. That's very, very difficult to do. So this seems like a no-brainer from AWS's standpoint. I'm just curious, are they going to launch this as a service? Are they going to continue the play out to the rest of the customers? Was this an internal acquisition so they had something to utilize that they're going to sell? This seems like a big enough acquisition that there's a lot of play.
Yeah, so my guess is that this is going to fit into their end user computing stuff that they have within AWS. And when you launch an Amazon Workspace, which is their desktop as a service offering, you'll have Wickr pre-installed there. And it's just going to be, so they built quite a few things there. They've got work docs, workspaces, kind of like a full G Suite Office 365 thing, but virtually running on their infrastructure platform.
It's like VDI deployed without all the extra effort.
Right? Yeah, I've looked at some of that for video editing.
Citrix has it. Azure has it. They've all got Windows desktops that you can just fire up. I actually used to use them for workshops, for when I do workshops. I had this one workshop where we were playing with ransomware, and used workspaces to do that.
It's a long tail for return on investment, right? When I was looking at it, I was like, well, it's really hard to buy video cards. So what if you could do your video processing, editing, and exporting in the cloud? and not have to worry about maintaining a machine locally. I mean, you maintain a machine, but it's just a terminal basically to your workstation in the cloud. Kind of interesting, but I haven't really dug into it much more than reading some of the documentation.
So that's just a guess, but that's my guess as to what they intend to do with Wickr's. They felt like they were just missing that that application. For some of their customers.
I think some of that play was the AWS Gov Cloud stuff too. I know that they're integrating, like the government's heavily relying on Wickr for a lot of things, and with AWS's Gov Cloud being kind of fully deployed and on its next revision, I think integration into that Gov Cloud, obviously they're going to get their money back probably that way. They didn't disclose a price, which is also interesting.
It just made me think about Windows 11 and just getting your thoughts and comments on Windows 11, because I mean, when I was looking at Microsoft's strategy and hearing, pundits basically talking about Microsoft's strategy, it was really about downplaying the operating system so that in our model of AWS, right, you basically have more of a cloud-based computing device similar to your Chromebook. But in the Microsoft ecosystem, they certainly have the Surface market to build on. And I think it was kind of interesting that they said, nope, we're going to come out with Windows 11, perhaps due to market pressure. Who knows?
There's still a huge base, right? Like between their enterprise clients and between like even the general public and consumers, like there's still a huge demand for the regular compute platform. And with Office integration, them starting to remove Skype, integrating full Teams for the whole work from home, it's pushing the SaaS applications that they currently have inside of the operating system. So it's similar to kind of like iMessage and your iTunes that's all integrated with inside of Apple's products. It's kind of the same thing, getting everybody on the same platform, being very touch and consumer friendly while still having that enterprise level. I don't see this changing for many years. Honestly, we're always going to have users that have a general compute need. And while cloud is great, there's still a lot of people that don't trust it, and or it's a little too complex to do certain aspects. You've got people that need to plug in jump drives, and they're not going to buy into the whole cloud and the ease of operation and use until that's all fully streamlined and there's kind of no difference between the two. And I don't think we're quite at that point yet. So
yeah, I mean, they tried to move more towards that the walled garden model with Windows 10s, and canceled that pretty quickly when it didn't work. And I think
convenience and security, man, they never play well together.
Well, Windows 11 too is you're tied to a certain level of TPM chip too, right? So it only goes back so far in hardware, which is going to be an interesting struggle.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to achieve like what the folks manage to on the mobile platforms, where security is much less of an issue because there's only one place for code to come from, for code, that you're going to execute and trust. You've got a way to put a chokehold on that and investigate all that code. Whereas Windows, there's still a lot of people, and Linux actually also, pulling from a lot of different disparate sources that aren't necessarily trusted. And Windows 10s was an attempt to, okay, here everything's got to come from the store, the Windows Store, but like other platforms, the reason BlackBerry died and so many of these others, the Windows Store sucks and it doesn't have everything that I want. So that's, I think, one of the reasons that you can run Android apps on Windows 11.
And there was someone that was describing the driver process too, how Microsoft didn't create like the closed garden, but controlled more of the garden, so you could just kind of grow your plants in it and they would flourish and be much safer, which is something you don't have when you get, I think that's the reason why Linux has not gained popularity in the desktop market especially, is because it's the Wild West when it comes to drivers and the communication between hardware manufacturers and drivers and the operating system. It's open, right? So anyone could do it. Microsoft kind of...
Quality and consistency is just all over the place.
And Microsoft had gained this more prescriptive method for implementing drivers, which I think is why you have a much better experience on Windows and stuff just works. That's because Microsoft created more of that environment.
Until they sign rootkits. At least.
Yeah, until they sign rootkits, right? Oops.
I think that's where the TPM comes into play, right? With the secure boot and the ability for you to have certain even virtualization sandbox protections at the kernel level based on what's allowed at boot time via secure boot, what drivers are being loaded at what point in that boot process. They're starting to segment that out where Apple's been able to control the hardware, and they've essentially done that from the beginning. This is kind of Microsoft's step to take that and further their hardware control, at least from what they can control, which a lot of that relies on secure boot and code integrity as the Windows boot process starts. So I think this is a great step in the right direction. And honestly, some of the features that they've done, like the Snap to grids, like some of the just usability is going to be a real nice breath of fresh air. Windows 10's been great, and I'm really hoping that pattern of bad operating systems from 95 to 98 to Millennium. I hope that doesn't play out. I really do.
I agree. I also hope the hardware supply chain gets healthy again, because if we're going to ask users to upgrade, you got to have the right hardware to go to, and right now that can be challenging. Still.
We need Ultrabooks to move past 16 gigs of RAM if they're going to solder it all on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there was one last thing. I feel like we're probably close to wrapping here, but there's a tool that has been brought to my attention by a few people. Like the source space, there have been a bunch of acquisitions. I think those tools are getting pretty expensive. And there's this tool called tines, as in like tines of a fork. And looks really, really neat as far as, I'm planning on trying it out. It's got a community edition, that's pretty generous. I think it looks like it's SaaS. It still runs on their cloud, but you can have up to 1,000 events per day and 10 users and 100 actions, which I assume actions are like playbooks. But in the source space, and there's a lot of open source out there for SOAR as well now. I've seen stuff that people are using with, things like, good Lord, my memory today. What is that? What is that ticketing system? Jira? Probably know it.
Jira?
No, the open source one.
Oh.
Spiceworks?
No. There is an open source
ticketing system. Just talking about it.
What's it called?
Yesterday. Yeah.
I implemented a couple in years past. Before I just settled on Jira.
This looks really interesting. This is like ticket? Ansible with Flow.
OS ticket.
No. How can I find it quickly?
To the Googles.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of sort of on the low code front here as well. And it looks fairly easy to integrate things with it, because one of the problems you have with SOAR is, that SOAR product is expensive, but it's got like a bajillion integrations. But then you try to use one of those integrations and you realize that, it's a bit of Python that somebody wrote in a rush in a couple hours 3 years ago. And, it doesn't work anymore. It's broken. And if you want them to fix it, you better hope at least 5 other customers also want that integration fixed. Otherwise it's going to go into some very long queue and they might get to it one day. But ultimately, I think if you want a lot of this stuff, there we go. The Hive is what I was thinking of.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's the Hive integrates with, there's a few open source SOAR out there. As well. So it's, I think it's an important space, for a lot of ops teams. Shuffle is the open source SOAR that Hive integrates with. So it's something I'm going to be doing some more testing on and jumping into more, because I think automation and orchestration is going to be, key, especially for organizations with less staff.
Yeah, this definitely looks interesting between some of the flows. Like this looks a lot like Microsoft Flow or whatever their
I was going to say Microsoft
Power Automate now.
Yep, Power Automate.
Like, this seems like this is kind of trying to tap into the areas where maybe you're not a full Microsoft shop, maybe you're not automating all the things that you need to integrate with, or even IFFT, I think.
Yep.
Like
if this and that.
Yeah, this looks interesting.
The problem with the Microsoft suite of tools that I ran into was Microsoft goes out of their way to make it very difficult to collect data from people outside of your domain and outside of your Azure AD or Active Directory. And
for security, of course, right?
For security, right? But like we
kills the
have,
power of it.
as an example, a lot of workflows that require we take data from external third parties that aren't authenticated to our domain, and then trigger a series of actions, and that's kind of where it fell down for me.
Yeah, the guest policies and how you allow external organization guest policies in Azure gets very complicated and has security ramifications if it's not done right. Like They're designed to do that, and Microsoft does that all the time. It's just getting that initial configuration integrated properly is not easy.
Well, and the thing with Flow is they just take away the option entirely from you. Like it's got to be somebody, with a CRA.com address, period.
Right.
There's no option.
That's actually handed down from the policy at the Azure management level. So there's a security policy that blocks that. So unless that's enabled at your root Azure level, then you have no control over that in Flow. Once that's enabled, then your possibilities open up. But that's obviously a security decision, and you have to do that right.
It's dangerous. Awesome. Well, thank you both for covering the news in this segment. Coming up next, interviews from RSA, featuring Mario Vuxen and Ricard Carlson. Stick around.